talented man in our factory community. Everyone said that with only an elementary school education, I was reaching too high, clinging to him. People talked too much, offered too many opinions. I told myself I should tone down my personality, become gentle and proper, be a good wife who cared for her family. But David was always devoted to his foster sister. As soon as he got his paycheck, he handed half of it to her, saying he was taking care of the daughter of a man who had once helped him. Even the welfare apartment, he gave it up for her family, claiming her late father had done him a great favor. When I asked for a divorce, he refused. He insisted there was nothing improper between them, that it was only a pure spiritual friendship. That farce dragged on for 35 years. By the time I was just over 50, I died of breast cancer. After I died, my son stood before my body, covered with a white sheet, his eyes filled with tears. "How wonderful," he said softly. "Now Dad and Aunt Emily can finally be together. Nothing worldly can keep them apart anymore." And then, I was reborn. It was the day my husband, David Carter, tried to persuade me to give up the Model Worker Award to his foster sister, Emily Brown. Back then, David was still young, in his 30s, talking endlessly about morals and fairness. "Emily's skin is thin, her personality too soft," he said. "That's why she failed the interview." Every time he mentioned her name, his tone softened, carrying that faint, ambiguous affection that made my blood boil. "If she doesn't win this time, her family will force her to marry someone else," he added. Marry someone else? I had come back, and I wasn't the same fool anymore. The day after David and I met through a matchmaker and started seeing each other, I caught David and Emily being physically intimate. David rushed to explain, panicked. "Anna, as long as you give in, I'll marry you," he said, the exact same words he'd used in my previous life. Rage exploded inside me. I raised my hand and slapped him hard. His glasses flew off and shattered on the floor. His fair, handsome face instantly turned the color of raw liver. "Anna, how dare you hit me?" he shouted, his voice sharp and furious. "How dare I?" I snapped. "I hit you because you're a hypocrite, a fake intellectual living off other people's blood and sweat." I rolled up my sleeves, determined to settle both old and new grudges at once. David was beaten until he curled up on the floor, kicked until he rolled over. If I'd had something handy as a weapon, I would have sent him straight to meet his ancestors. Emily, who had been hiding nearby, suddenly screamed, "Anna, are you crazy? Oh my God, someone help, she's hitting him." I grabbed Emily by her braid and slapped her across the face so hard that her cheeks turned bright red like ripe peaches. "Not only am I hitting him," I said coldly, "I'm hitting you too. You two want some noble, comrade-style love? Fine, I'll beat you both, body, mind, and soul, inside and out, until you remember this pain for the rest of your lives." David was severely nearsighted. Without his glasses, he couldn't tell people from objects 3 meters away. Emily was a frail beauty who had probably never worked a real day in her life. Taking on the two of them alone was child's play for me. When I finally got tired, I clapped the dust from my hands. "Phony intellectuals, shameless hypocrites," I sneered. "You two really are a perfect match. If I ever see you again, even in broad daylight, I'll beat you on sight." Before leaving, still fuming, I stomped once more on both their faces for good measure. I should have gone home first, to check on my parents, to see how Mom and Dad were doing. But behind Emily, she sobbed and sniffled, saying, "Anna, I'll go tell the management about you." How ridiculous. If anyone's going to ask why I hit you, do you dare to say it out loud? Only then did David remember that he had asked me to give up the advanced worker title. He hurriedly pulled Emily back. Emily was indignant, but couldn't bring herself to fight back. "By what right would you hit me?" she sniffled. I was furious enough to boil over. Based on the shameless faces of the two of them, David's last words were, "Say it loudly to my sister Emily one more time. See if you dare." David, his body full of bruises as if roasted over a fire, could only stammer, "It's because of her. Oh, Emily, it's only for you." I know David all too well. In love matters in my previous life, he was always wanting both this and that, indecisive and cowardly. I sneered, "If she's the one, then why can't he speak plainly to her? Clearly he doesn't truly have her in his heart." Encouraged, Emily urged him on. "David, tell me, how far did you go for me? Say it, David. You married Anna for me, right? Did you really do it for me?" I burst out laughing uncontrollably. Ah, of course. This is the proof that David has Emily in his heart. He already has that other woman inside him, yet insists on marrying me and says it's for her? With just that line, shouldn't I have every reason to beat him, and you too? You coming here now and claiming coincidence. I didn't kill you for it, but damn, you two are a waste of heaven's mercy. David pointed at me enraged. Anna, you are a sharp-tongued woman. You don't understand the feelings between us. If it weren't for giving Emily the advanced worker title, did you think I would agree to marry you? I'll take back everything I said before. You're not worthy to marry me. Don't ever dream of having me. Hearing that, Emily was immediately moved to tears. She rushed into David's arms, sobbing and acting clingy. David, I knew it. You did it for me. You sacrificed yourself for me. In your heart there is only me. No one else. I clapped my hands hard. Well said. Did everyone hear that? The way David and Emily were embracing suddenly froze, and both of them turned to look behind us. The factory director, Mr. Thompson, was walking by pushing his bicycle. The workshop supervisor, Mr. Harris, and several co-workers who had just finished their shift stood at the alley's mouth, all staring in astonishment. The expressions on their faces clearly read, "Oh my God." In my previous life, when David made his marriage request, I had been a little stunned. David immediately wrapped his arms around me, making promises that he would treat me well from then on, and that he would marry me, saying that the advanced worker title no longer mattered. That year, I was an unwed girl who had never been so intimate with a man. Besides, David, when he was young, had really been a handsome, well-known young man in the factory. In that moment, I forgot to push him away. As it happened, Mr. Thompson's bicycle chain broke as he rode by, and he pushed his bike past us. Our private affair was instantly roasted and exposed like a duck in the oven, completely cooked and dead. This time, because I had assaulted people, my advanced worker title was revoked. Emily, pretending to cry while hearing that I had lost my voting qualification, couldn't help bursting into laughter. The factory doctor applied medicine to her wound. She bit her lip and rolled her eyes at the pain, her face that of a fragile, sickly beauty. Emily's performance was so fake, even her expressions were busy with acting. David couldn't stand it any longer. The factory doctor lightly pressed the wound, and Emily squealed that it hurt. She hurriedly shot David a coquettish look, like a young little wife, and David returned it with the same affectionate, loving gaze. The factory doctor was disgusted. He'd been hurt badly enough to be sent to the infirmary, yet they still put on an act. "If you complain I'm rough, then go to the hospital," I said. Outside the infirmary, people who pretended to be just passing by had actually gathered to watch the show. "Oh, so that's the wild lovebird pair who got beaten, huh?" "Yes, that girl's work performance isn't anything special. She wants the advanced worker nomination, so she told her lover to use seduction to get Anna. Anna found it disgusting, so she beat the man right there, and the girl got hit too. Ha ha ha. All for an empty title. She dares sell herself for that actor David? What actor? He's been bewitched until he became a fool. They were so intimate. How can this actor claim he's still single and wants to find someone in the factory? One beauty isn't enough. He'll pick a few more for sure." I knew these words would spread through the whole factory quickly. Public opinion has never been controllable. There were a couple of different takes. Emily's calm and simple. Maybe Anna is just jealous and deliberately hit her. I think David and Anna don't match Emily at all. Maybe Anna resented David for not choosing her, so she hit him. She's really fierce. The person who said that was a young, pretty factory worker. The woman next to her even tried to pull her back, but she didn't seem to care. At that moment, a commotion rose outside. "Who dares bully my daughter?" A large, burly man with a crude, powerful build, wearing an oil-stained work uniform with a wrench on his belt, strode in with an expansive, heroic air as if stepping out from a halo of light. He came in through the door. It was my father, Frank Lewis, who had rushed over with a few of his apprentices after hearing I'd been in trouble and had gone to the infirmary to lend me moral support. Tears poured down my face. It had been more than 30 years since I'd last seen my father in my previous life. Overcome, I wailed and flung myself into his arms. At first my father was startled. "What? My daughter has been suffering so much?" The apprentices behind him were all surprised. Good heavens! Is my Anna crying? Which scoundrel dares show his face and get beaten for it? Whoever bullied my Anna enough to make her cry, come out here and take your beating. The factory doctor, who knew my father and knew Frank Lewis to be a headstrong troublemaker in the factory, immediately slipped into the inner room and locked the door from the inside. The door slammed so hard that several bottles of medicine on the cabinet were knocked over with a clatter of broken glass. I clung to my father's arm and sobbed incoherently. My father looked at the miserable pair inside, the wretched lovers clinging to each other, trembling as they stared back at us, and the scene made it seem as if we were the villains trying to split lovers apart. "Who is this woman?" he demanded. David spoke up. "Master Lewis, it's me, I'm David." My father frowned. "Humph, you don't recognize him? This is David?" Emily piped up. "I'm Emily Brown." "You're Emily?" my father said incredulously. "Oh, you're Miss Chu's daughter, so sickly and nearly collapsed. You're quite willing to take a beating, aren't you?" As my father spoke, David still kept up a veneer of politeness and immediately pulled himself together. "Master Lewis, your daughter has really gone too far. Outrageous," my father barked. "Even if you refused her marriage proposal, you still have no right to lay hands on my daughter and Miss Chu like that. This is totally uncalled for." David, who'd lost his glasses, truly looked blind. There was no pretense about it. The factory director, the workshop supervisor, and the others all heard every word clearly, yet he still dared to turn truth upside down in front of my father. Scheming to save face. My father narrowed his eyes, his fists as big as clay pots tensed as if ready to strike, when a low, furious growl of a middle-aged woman sounded from outside. "Who says she's innocent?" Mom snapped as she swept into the room. Her hair was half pinned in rollers, the other half curled and tucked behind her ears. She strode in with a powerful gait, glaring. I stumbled forward and threw myself into her arms, sobbing. Mom's face twitched. "Don't cry. It's nothing. Just some deceitful dog. We don't need him." Aunt Lily, my mother's close friend who had been the matchmaker when David and I met, had also come in, her rollers still in her hair too, so they must have stopped at the salon together on the way over. Before they'd even set down their things, they'd rushed here. Everyone's eyes turned to Emily. "Miss Chu, did you know that David and Anna were meeting to get to know each other?" they asked. Under everyone's gaze, Emily could only give a faint a tiny sound like a mosquito. Aunt Lily scolded her. "So you purposely stole someone else's husband?" Emily pretended to be innocent and about to cry. Aunt Lily snapped. "Don't cry until you get out of that man's heart first." Only then did David and Emily react properly. They still hadn't let go of each other since they'd embraced. When they finally released, both their faces were ghastly. "Auntie Liu, Anna and Emily are not what you think," David began. Margaret, Mom, didn't even look him straight in the eye. She clicked her tongue twice at him. "Serves him right, what a disgrace, but well deserved. Mr. Great Actor David, in front of everyone here you cuddled Miss Chu like that and still refused to admit it? Do you have any backbone at all?" David froze. Emily, standing behind him, cautiously tugged at his sleeve. He turned and looked at her. The sight of her, weak and pitiful, sparked in him an even stronger urge to protect. The two of them then quietly confirmed to each other that their hearts belonged to the other. "Ho ho ho, he's admitting it himself," someone chuckled. My mother, tired of standing, pulled up a chair and sat down calmly. "On the way here, I heard people say that right in front of the factory director, the workshop supervisor, and some new clerical staff, you said you would never be able to have my daughter Anna. Is that true? My Anna will never be yours? Yet you and Anna were meeting, getting to know each other for months, and never confirmed it. Not sooner, not later. Only when Anna caught you two in the act did you admit that Miss Chu is the one in your heart?" Aunt Lily snorted. "Isn't this just the classic playboy behavior, fishing in many ponds?" Mom nodded. "Everyone understands this truth. Today you like one, tomorrow you fancy another, the next day you sacrifice yourself for someone else. Playing with young women's feelings like it's some matchmaking game. Tell me, doesn't that deserve a beating? Wearing this kind of hat." She stopped and looked at him so sharply that David went pale. "Absolutely not," he said, stammering. "You and David did go on a matchmaking date, but you like Emily?" my mother snapped, seizing the opening and pounding the table as she scolded. Listen, going on a date with one person and liking someone else, tell me, isn't that bullying? David immediately protested. I didn't bully anyone. I already told Anna that we couldn't. But of course, once exposed, there was no denying it. You wanted to marry my daughter and then coax her into giving the Advanced Worker Award to Emily Chu. Everyone heard that, didn't they? David could only nod. Did Emily beg you to sacrifice for her? My mother demanded, her sharp gaze sweeping over Emily. Instinctively, Emily trembled and shook her head. Then this was David's intention all along. What being with you makes a woman a queen? Marrying you is a heavenly honor? Which university did you graduate from, Mr. Big Actor, and who taught you to be so arrogant? Mother banged the table again. The whole room, the ones being scolded and those not, flinched. As for your virtue, young man, we've just witnessed it today. I, Margaret, like to keep friends in many places. The discipline committee, the women's association, even the factory office. And my old man has a reputation in the plant too. I may not be able to call 100 people at once, but my apprentices will answer a call. From today on, we each go our own way. But if I ever hear a bad word about Anna, guess what the house will do? David pressed his lips together and finally dared not say another word. Mother cast a glance at Emily and told her, as for you, take care of yourself. Don't go picking up other people's leftovers. If you do, even if you're all broken, you'll still come crawling to grab what's left and I'll scratch you up. She deliberately gave a little hiss. Emily, frightened, immediately slipped back. David shot me a glance, complicated and satisfied. David murmured, Don't be afraid, Anna, you still have me. Even though I had been reborn into this life, I felt nothing but disgust and nausea. When we got home, I stared at the dorm room I'd lived in as a girl and couldn't compose myself. It wasn't until that evening, listening to my parents talk at the dinner table, that I calmed down a little. Margaret, let's just let David and Emily go. My father said, What else? He really wanted Anna to lose the Advanced Worker nomination? Even if it's true this time, everyone saw that the girl hit them. David's dad is a college man, and Emily is well liked in the plant. Who knows how many people like those two? Mother replied, They might hold back and not press charges. We should give gifts when appropriate, keep visiting when needed, but we must restore Anna's reputation and standing. Don't be like this, you two. I don't want her to be considered for the Advanced Worker anymore. My father looked at me worriedly. You've always been strong since you were little. I have some apprentices. They may not be college grads, but I can introduce them to you tomorrow. Mother smirked wryly. Would Anna really cry over a man? It must be because of the nomination. I licked my lips and couldn't help asking, Mom, if I rashly marry David and only discover afterward that his heart belongs to Emily and he refuses to admit it, if I want a divorce but can't get one and spend my life dragged out because of him, wouldn't that make my life worthless? Mother shrugged. My daughter, you can't be like that. At the very least, do what you did today. Beat those two dogs, strip them, and throw them out into the yard. In my past life, I really did do this more than once, though I never stripped their clothes completely. My father murmured, You still have your mother and me. We'll help you teach those two miserable dogs a lesson. The year I had just given birth to my son, one day I discovered our savings book reading zero. The cooking oil and food in the house had also run out. I had just stepped out of the dorm to go shopping when I saw David carrying half a sack of rice and flour into the Chu house. Of course, I went and raised a huge ruckus right at their door. My parents, who were then returning from visiting relatives in the countryside, were in an accident on the way back and were delayed. When they finally arrived and I apologized, I collapsed and cried uncontrollably. Daughter, don't cry, my mother said. You have nothing to apologize for. If you feel ashamed, all the more reason not to cry. Go to work as usual. Your father and I won't let you suffer injustice for nothing. I looked at my parents with tear-filled eyes and gradually came to understand and awaken. They were my biological parents who loved me most in life. How could they blame me? At that time, when the news hit, David didn't just once blame me, saying it was all because I was suspicious. Not only had I ruined his reputation and career, but I had harmed my own parents. How many times have I told you, he said. Chu's father did me a favor, so I'm taking care of Emily. There is nothing improper between us. That day there was not only Emily in the house but also her mother. How dare you use such base thoughts to suspect me? He kept telling me those words. The deaths of my parents were clearly caused by my own malice and narrow-mindedness, he said. And for many years after, during fierce arguments, David used that incident to provoke me, forcing me to remember that I had caused my parents' deaths, plunging me into remorse and self-blame, enduring repeated torment. Yet if not for the ambiguous relationship between him and Emily serving as the fuse, none of this would have happened. Did you hear? That great actor David was taken to the hospital at midnight by his roommate, people said. Is Emily all right? Haven't heard anything. But the great actor David insisted it was appendicitis acting up and never mentioned Anna attacking him. Well, in that case he's fairly manly, isn't he? Manly my foot. He's the type who only eats from the pot and looks after himself. Who calls him a great actor, favored by the factory director. His looks have made many people swoon. Compared to him, Emily isn't just a little worse off. The next day when I went to the workshop, the gossip was loud. As soon as they saw me show up, people scattered. Oh my God, here comes the one who slapped him, someone cried. Terrifying. The remark came from a female worker, Claire Turner, the same woman who had been standing by the window yesterday watching the show and sniping that David and I were mismatched. Claire and I hadn't met in nearly 35 years. In my previous life, we were briefly co-workers with little contact, yet she always nitpicked me. Back then, I was basking in the joy of newlywed life because I had married David, a rare college student at the factory. His gentle charm made him shine all the more. Compared with the other young male workers in the dorm area, David truly stood out. There were far too many gossip mongers in the plant. Claire had gone and stuck her head into death's path this time. How could I not scold her? Does she think she's some lightweight who can take hits? Claire tried to step back, her mouth still spitting unpleasant remarks like some petty sanctimonious woman. No wonder people ignored her. He's a college student. She's not even on his radar. I hurled my glove straight at her face and let out everything I'd been holding in. You're that shameless just to earn a reward? I snapped. That college boy. I don't want him anymore. And now you're drooling over him? Go ahead, throw yourself at him. What, you're afraid I'll ruin your little plan to serve yourself up to him? Yesterday, David was still holding Emily in his arms. Why didn't you just jump in too? Greedy but gutless. You've already thrown your dignity away. So what are you scared of? If you really don't have the guts, then line up behind the great Mr. David Carter. Who knows, maybe one day you'll get your turn to be his mistress. Claire Turner stood frozen, unable to speak. People said she left crying, probably awakened by my words of wisdom. The world suddenly felt touched, or maybe it was just my satisfaction. In my previous life, my temper hadn't been good. In this one, it was even worse. But whatever happened, I'd rather be fierce than suffer again through the agony of breast cancer. A few days later, hardly anyone dared gossip in front of me anymore. But Claire clearly wasn't done. She actually launched a full-blown pursuit of David while he was still in the hospital. One day she brought flowers to his bedside. The next, she cooked soup for him, acting like a gentle, virtuous wife. Her best friend tried to persuade her to stop, but Claire said, David Carter is the most handsome college graduate in the whole factory. His essays were praised by the factory director. The other men around here are either country bumpkins or nearsighted idiots. Who can compare to him? Emily got him first, but am I really worse than that frail little thing? Her friend's mouth dropped open, and she didn't dare say another word. Claire showed up at the hospital almost every other day. Whatever David was given, he accepted. Whatever he was fed, he ate. He neither rejected nor accepted her outright, leaving Claire thinking she actually had a chance. For some reason, during this time, Emily didn't cry or make scenes at all. David's written self-criticism had already been sent to the factory. Considering how rare and valuable college-educated talent was, and seeing that after being hospitalized he hadn't blamed me or demanded punishment, the management viewed him as magnanimous and broad-minded. So the whole incident was quietly brushed aside. What was big became small, and what was small disappeared. But there was no way I was going to let them off that easily. By September, the northern air had turned crisp. Claire showed up in a tight silk dress the color of golden goose feathers, soft and delicate, perfectly highlighting her curves. "The great Mr. David Carter gave me a book of poems," she said sweetly. "Love poems. He even read one to me, said he loved me deeply." I almost laughed out loud at her bragging. The author of that book was someone named I Ching, and the original line clearly meant, "I love this land deeply." Not, "I love you deeply." In my past life, David and I had once shared tender moments too. He used to read poetry to me as well, but the poem he chose was Piggy Mother, about a caretaker full of affection but treating me like an old nanny instead of a wife. Claire blocked my way. "What are you laughing at?" she demanded. "I'm laughing," I said, "because some people are stupid and don't even know it." Claire puffed up like a fighting rooster, her eyes gleaming with challenge. "I'm really curious. What did you and David usually talk about before? Poetry, literature, art?" "Of course," I said with exaggerated seriousness. "We talked about Marx and Lenin, about Chairman Mao's thought, about policy and structure. From the Industrial Revolution to the four modernizations, from poetry and prose to philosophy and the meaning of life." With every sentence I spoke, Claire's face darkened another shade. Finally, I deliberately twisted the knife. "You don't even know the essayist whose last name is I and first name is Ching, do you?" "If you don't even know that," I said coolly, "then what the hell do you know about the elegance of love and poetry?" Claire Turner stomped her foot in fury. "What's so great about you anyway? You only have an elementary school education. Why doesn't the great Mr. David Carter ever look your way? He's been in the hospital all this time and hasn't mentioned you once. You hang around him every day. Tell me, after all this time of throwing yourself at him, has the great Mr. Carter fallen deeply in love with you yet?" "With Emily," I replied. "David could at least pretend to be patient in front of me. But when it comes to you, you're just muttering to yourself about some deep love. Tell me, are you the queen of idiots or something?" Before she could speak, I added mockingly, "Forget it, you wouldn't understand anyway. Why don't you just run along? I'm tired of scolding you." I deliberately sounded as if I were comparing her to something insignificant, just to make her feel even smaller. Claire's fists clenched tight. Finally, in a burst of madness, she slapped herself twice across her pale cheeks. Then, raising her reddened face with a twisted smile, she said, "I'll tell David that you hit me out of jealousy, that you attacked me. You'll never earn his forgiveness. David will admit he loves me, because he's supposed to be mine." What on earth? How did I never realize in my previous life that Claire was this insane? Still, I almost wanted her to stir up chaos. "Then go on," I said. "Go early. Pretend to be pitiful. Play the weak victim. Though even then, you might not be a match for Emily Chu." Claire glared at me, her eyes blazing with resentment, then stormed off. Not far away, Emily had been biting her lip and crying silently. Hearing all this, she turned and ran toward the hospital too. Both of David's great loves converging at once. I couldn't deny I was thrilled to see it. I checked the time on my wristwatch, hurried to the communications office, and made a few well-placed phone calls. By that evening, the good news arrived. David's little love boat had capsized in the hospital. Claire Turner had headbutted him so hard she broke 2 of his ribs. The scene was reportedly a spectacle. Claire and Emily pulling each other's hair, 2 women crying, 2 shouting, and 1 more trying to mediate while chaos reigned. David tried to slip away in the confusion, but the other women dragged him back, demanding that he explain himself once and for all. Claire's face was scratched bloody by Emily's nails. When she saw David run off instead of defending her, she lost her mind completely. The whole ward was full of pretty girls like her, all hand-picked admirers, and she rammed herself into David like a crazed bull. He went flying out the door, crashing onto the floor and snapping 2 ribs. Little Ben, one of my father's apprentices, told me the story later, grinning ear to ear and holding up 2 fingers. At that time, he said, he and a few others had been grilling skewers with me at a street stall. I downed a shot of white liquor in 1 gulp, my heart overflowing with satisfaction. When David got knocked through the door, Ben said, he even dragged someone down with him. "Guess who, Anna?" I stayed silent. The guys around me urged him on. Come on, don't stop halfway. Who was it? Ben said. It was one of the higher-ups, a visiting inspector from headquarters. You could think of him as a royal envoy on a secret mission. He'd come to our factory for an inspection, wasn't feeling well, and quietly went to the hospital for a checkup. But just as he was leaving, David got rammed through the door and crashed right into him, knocking him over and cracking his ribs too. A tall man sitting beside us exclaimed, "No way." The moment the hospital realized a superior official was injured, layers of staff swarmed to assist and rushed him off for examination. Someone muttered, "That's almost too much of a coincidence." Ben snorted, "Coincidence? My ass, it's what you call karma. Sow the wind, reap the storm." During David's hospital stay, dozens of young women had been visiting every day, each one trying to outdo the other in care and devotion. And David, that charming hypocrite, never turned anyone away. In fact, he gave every single one of them a book. They say he just wanted to make literary friends, my sister, who worked as a nurse, told me. But every day during visiting hours, someone different shows up. Every 2 hours a new girl comes in. One stays to chat for an hour, then leaves, and another arrives right after. It's obviously arranged so the visitors don't run into each other. Then one day, no one knew how it happened, but all those girls arrived at the hospital at the same time. Claire Turner was just about to throw herself into David's arms when Emily Chu walked in, and the two of them immediately clawed at each other. They brought it upon themselves, really. The others in the ward couldn't help laughing, enjoying the chaos. David's glorious image completely collapsed that day. I sat quietly on the sidelines with a small glass of wine, though inside I was dancing disco. This grand spectacle. Wasn't it all part of my plan? I had grown up in that factory community. I knew every girl who had ever gone to visit David. I could easily find out who they were. Even the inspection schedule of that higher-up who'd been hit. I'd picked it up by chance from the newspaper. In my past life, Claire was just an unexpected spark that set off the explosion, crashing right into my carefully laid trap. In the 1980s, being a college graduate like David Carter was enough to make him a walking honey trap, attracting all sorts of women. In my previous life, after our arranged introduction, there had been other girls buzzing around him too. But everyone knew my temper, and my family's. I once found a small gift from another woman on David's desk, and I'd thrown such a fit that it terrified him into good behavior. After that, he finally learned to refuse the attention, and only then did things quiet down for a while. But this time around, it was different. Emily Chu was frail and delicate, always playing the pitiable damsel with tearful eyes, the very picture of a fragile beauty. At work, she was forever dragging her feet, making excuses until her tasks had to be handed off to others. Whenever anything happened, she'd claim poor health and take endless sick leave. After the scandal about her stealing someone else's man spread through the factory, Emily's reputation was in ruins. A woman like her still dared to dream about winning the Advanced Worker Award? Since she couldn't earn it honestly, she tried to gain advantages through men. But the more she did, the more people despised her. Meanwhile, David's college degree still gave him a certain shine in the eyes of everyone at the factory. People whispered, "What gives Emily the right to be involved with a college-educated man like David Carter?" So, no matter how she tried, a mistress was always a mistress. After that disastrous fight in the hospital, Emily locked herself at home, refusing to eat. Her mother brought her meals and begged her to open the door for 2 days straight, sighing and crying at the threshold. A tragic performance for all the neighbors to see. She seemed determined to let the whole world know she was the most pitiful woman alive. The next time I saw Claire Turner, she was wearing a dull gray factory uniform, clutching her belongings from the dorm. Her father walked beside her, face hidden under a straw hat. Claire's neck was twisted painfully to one side as if she'd strained it, her expression sour and bitter. "I just don't get it," she said hoarsely. "Why would David look at her and Emily, but not at me?" I scoffed. "Do me a favor and don't drag those 2 dogs into my conversation. Weren't you in the hospital that day? Didn't you see clearly? There were 4 girls from our factory, 2 more from outside units, plus you and Emily. 8 women total. Enough to form 2 full combat teams. And you're still worried about which of his concubine palaces you belong to, the first, second, or third? Claire flushed with anger, her crooked neck trembling. I know his morals are trash, she said, her voice cracking. But his conditions are good. You can act like you don't care, Anna, but isn't it because your father works in a key department and your mother's an office employee? God, Claire Turner really had no filter. That last sentence even dragged her own father down with her. Why did she treat me like the obstacle between her and David Carter? What was with the fake clueless act? David already proposed to me once. Whatever his reason, I was the only woman he ever said he wanted to marry. And Emily Chu? What did she even count for? If David truly loved her, would he have kept her hanging all this time without ever marrying her? Let's be honest, David was just toying with Emily. That advanced worker award nonsense? It was just a little charity gift, a crumb tossed her way as a consolation prize before he settled down. Suddenly, something clicked inside me. This explanation actually made sense. Why hadn't I ever thought of it before? But that didn't mean I'd tolerate Claire's endless provocations. When I saw she was about to speak again, I turned my sarcasm back on full blast. You never really liked David, I told her. You just want to marry him. For a comfortable life, to satisfy your vanity. The only reason you keep picking fights with me is because I almost got what you dream about every night. Now that I don't want it anymore, you're desperate to have it, because you've always needed something to make yourself feel above others. You and Emily have been competing for ages, openly and in secret, I continued, my tone sharp as a knife. But if you look around, there are plenty of girls just like you. You want to believe you're special, but in David's heart, you're nothing. Claire, the world isn't made of just one man. Marriage isn't the only way to change your life. When will you stop measuring yourself against others? Her father, standing beside her silently, looked weary. He was a quiet, humble man, and I didn't want to argue anymore. I stepped aside, letting go of my irritation. But Claire, unable to find an outlet for her frustration, kicked a lamppost in anger. Claire, her father said evenly, it's getting dark. Let's go. If we're late, there won't be a bus home. Seeing her still defiant, he sighed. I know you look down on me, just a cook who burns coal in the factory kitchen. You've got too much pride, and you want to marry a college man so you can hold your head high, but that man doesn't have you in his heart. Every girl who visited him in the hospital got a book. The Chu family girl, she has stacks of them, and they almost discussed marriage. I don't understand why you keep throwing yourself at him. Claire crouched down, covering her face, and finally burst into tears. In my previous life, David wanted me to be the gentle wife who kept his home steady. Yet he also craved Emily's softness, her cultured and refined manner. That emotional comfort she offered him. So outside the family he built with me, he always ran to the Chu household whenever he had free time. No matter how much noise I made, he refused to divorce. Then Emily went so far as to fake a medical certificate, a virginity test, and post it on the factory bulletin board to prove the purity of her relationship with David. And just like that, their dirty affair turned into a noble friendship. A comrade-like bond praised by others. Oh, how pure and clean their love must be, people whispered. Meanwhile, I became the wicked, bitter wife. My name, Anna Lewis, slandered across the entire factory community. And David? What a gentleman. He didn't divorce me. No, he magnanimously forgave me, the common petty woman who just couldn't comprehend the spiritual connection between them. Back then, getting a divorce was nothing like today. From the moment one applied through the workplace to the department heads, every colleague and relative got involved. Back then, even the neighborhood committee got involved. Everyone, friends, coworkers, even strangers, felt entitled to give advice, all saying the same thing. You absolutely must not get divorced. I used to dream that even the stray dog outside my door could speak human words telling me, don't get divorced. Honestly, the dog probably made more sense than most people. Because of public pressure, my parents' passing, and my responsibility to raise my son, I couldn't divorce David Carter, no matter how much I wanted to. At work, I was labeled a temperamental woman, so I never got promoted. Meanwhile, David, with his false image of generosity and tolerance, rose quickly through the ranks. Relatives and old neighbors all advised me the same thing. If there's no love left, Fine. Just make sure you control the money. Keep the finances in your hands, take care of your child. Let the man come and go as he pleases. No matter what, don't let Emily Chu take your place. But after a while, even something that smells pleasant can start to rot. I listened to their advice, and eventually, David did start earning more and more money. I treated him like a live-in employee, someone who just earned for the household, while emotionally we'd been separated for more than 15 years. But I wasn't happy. By my early 50s, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that was the end of me. This time, I made things clear from the start. I drew a firm line between myself and David and exposed his secret affair with Emily Chu for everyone to see. They weren't some tragic lovers who couldn't live without each other. Far from it. There were plenty of women just like her buzzing around him. For David Carter, love came far too easily, and once he had it, it meant nothing. The truth was, he didn't love anyone. He only kept people around as long as they were useful, and he always placed them exactly where they could serve him best. Because of that selfish, manipulative man and his fake love, I had carried an undeserved stain on my name for an entire lifetime. He destroyed me once. He shouldn't blame me for tearing off his mask now. After the National Day holiday, the factory announced the list of employees receiving the Advanced Worker Commendation. Each department had someone honored, and among the winners, I finally saw a face I'd longed to meet. My sister-in-law from my past life, Susan Carter, David's elder sister. Susan had a sharp, capable beauty about her. Even in her loose factory uniform, she stood out, elegant and intellectual in a way no one else there could match. In this life, she was still working in the local transport division, but she'd been transferred to the main factory because of her award. After the ceremony, the factory hosted a banquet. I made my way over, intending to introduce myself, but before I could, I overheard Susan scolding someone. "Don't come crying to me about your marriage to David," she said curtly. Then came a soft, trembling voice I recognized instantly. Emily Chu. She looked pale and pitiful, as if she were about to burst into tears. "Please, Susan," she begged, "come to the hospital with me. David's waiting for you." My eyes went cold. "Emily," I said evenly, "from the way you're talking, is David about to die in the hospital or something?" Emily flinched, a bead of cold sweat sliding down her forehead. The people chatting nearby fell silent, their eyes shifting between the two of us. Whenever I tore someone's mask off, I always did it in public, loudly and without fear. Emily, however, had been drowning in gossip for so long that she seemed to shrink under everyone's stares, as if her spine had collapsed in half. We hadn't even exchanged more than a few words, but she was already losing her composure. I looked at her quietly for a long time. Finally, she gritted her teeth and decided to fight back. "Anna," she said, "if it weren't for you, why would David be in the hospital in the first place?" At that moment, I actually had to thank David Carter for the wholesome image he'd built for himself. "Didn't David go to the hospital for appendicitis?" I asked coolly. "So why is he still there?" I tilted my head, pretending to think. "Oh, right, wasn't it you and Claire Turner who fought in the hospital, and David tried to break it up, only to get his ribs broken in the process? Poor thing, he's really had it rough." Then I smiled faintly. "But that misfortune, didn't you cause it? What's that got to do with me?" Laughter erupted around us. Sarcasm and whispers filled the air as people mocked Emily Chu. How could she say something like that? Please, she stole David from Anna. But she couldn't even keep him. She's useless and shameless, blaming Anna of all people. Under the ridicule, Emily's head sank lower and lower. Just then, a male coworker, someone familiar, gave her a pitying pat on the shoulder. Emily covered her face and ran out of the banquet hall, tears streaming down. The laughter didn't stop even after she was gone. Susan Carter, David's sister, looked a little confused. I took the opportunity to step forward and introduced myself confidently. "Hi, Susan," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Anna Lewis." "Anna Lewis?" Susan frowned slightly but still shook my hand with a polite smile. "How do you know me?" "How could I not know you?" I replied with a warm smile. "When you went up to accept your award, the host announced your name. I suddenly remembered I'd read one of your essays somewhere before." Susan blinked, surprised. "You've read my work? But none of my pieces have ever been published. I've only shared them with my younger brother." Oh, maybe I'm mistaken, I said with admiration in my voice. But your writing has such clarity and sincerity that I must have remembered it from somewhere. My words drew the attention of several nearby managers, including the factory director himself. The same one who had long been a fan of David's so-called essays. Susan, hearing that I'd truly read her work, began talking animatedly about her writing, her ideas, inspirations, and structure. As she spoke, the factory director's expression shifted from suspicion to realization, then to astonishment. I knew Susan always carried her manuscripts with her. Casually, I mentioned how I admired her drafts. Susan immediately pulled several pages from her bag and handed them over modestly. "They're not that good," she said. "Please, feel free to give feedback." Among the papers she handed to the director was a piece I recognized instantly, one David had claimed as his own. The director read it carefully, then smiled. "Excellent," he said simply. That very night, the local transport division where Susan worked received a notice. She was being transferred to the general office. In my past life, I hadn't been well educated, but I married the most distinguished man in the factory, a so-called literary genius. After our marriage, David only wanted me to stay home and keep house. He never discussed anything intellectual with me, so I had to teach myself, slowly, painstakingly. The first New Year after we married, we visited his hometown, and that's when I met Susan for the first time. She was working in the local transport department back then. Educated, composed, and kind. When she saw how clumsily I read the newspaper or wrote characters, she didn't mock me. Instead, she offered to teach me. After we returned home, I'd spend my free time bent over the table, reading David's books and articles. I studied everything he wrote, or rather, what he claimed to write, until one day I noticed something peculiar. David always made 2 copies of his essays, one locked away neatly in a box and another placed in his desk drawer. One copy was written in Susan's graceful handwriting, the other, in David's. Yes, David could write decently, but the pieces that the factory director praised most, the ones that earned David his reputation, had all been written by Susan. David had simply copied them and signed his own name at the bottom. When I confronted him about it, David flew into a rage. He shouted at me, red-faced, as if I had wronged him. After that fight, David burned every piece of writing he kept locked away in his box, then added a padlock to his desk drawer. I was stunned, not understanding why he'd go that far. Out of consideration for our marriage, I let it go and didn't push further. Years later, when the topic came up again, David insisted, "You only graduated elementary school, Anna. How could you possibly understand those essays? You must have remembered wrong." And just like that, the matter was dropped. In my previous life, Susan Carter had also won the advanced worker title, yet for some reason, she was never transferred to the main factory. But this time, with David hospitalized after being beaten, and later rammed by Claire Turner, breaking 2 ribs, Susan smoothly took his place and was transferred. As for how that happened, I didn't need to guess. When Susan arrived, word spread quickly, and David, lying in his hospital bed, grew anxious and agitated. With his ribs fractured, he couldn't move, so he sent Emily Chu to intercept his sister and convince her to come to the hospital. But Susan had no interest in doing so. David told Emily to pull Susan out of that celebration banquet and bring her here. Emily, of course, failed miserably. David's face went pale with anger. "You can't even handle something that simple?" he snapped. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "How can you blame me, David? You're the one who wrote home saying your match was with the Lewis family. Now because of you, everyone whispers behind my back. They mock me at every turn. I still went to that banquet because you asked me to, and your sister wouldn't even acknowledge me. She just walked away as if I didn't exist." David sighed in irritation, but tried to soften his tone. "Emily, I only told you to find my sister because I wanted to talk about our marriage. Before bringing you home to meet my parents for the new year, I thought you should make a good impression on Susan first. Besides, I'm in the hospital. Shouldn't my own sister visit me before attending some stupid banquet? Isn't that more important?" Emily sniffled, somewhat appeased. But remembering how cold Susan had been to her earlier, she frowned and said, "Susan's obviously in the leadership's good graces now. I told her you were in the hospital, But the moment that Anna Lewis said a manager wanted to meet her, she turned and left, didn't even glance back. David's expression tightened. "Who did you say? Anna Lewis?" Emily pouted. "Yeah. She wouldn't badmouth me to your sister, would she? Susan didn't seem angry, right?" But David wasn't listening anymore. His thoughts spun in another direction entirely. Anna Lewis? She lost her advanced worker eligibility. What was she doing at that banquet? He knew Anna's family background was solid. Her mother had strong connections, and her father held a respected position at the factory. Could it be that she's still not over me? He wondered. "David?" Emily's voice broke into his thoughts. "Do you think your sister hates me?" David looked at her, taking in her delicate, tearful face and the practiced helplessness in her gestures. There was something enticing about her vulnerability, but also something a little tiresome. Her charm was pleasant in small doses, but over time it began to feel contrived. Then, inevitably, he thought of Anna. Anna wasn't conventionally beautiful, but she had a natural grace to her features, a clear, spirited look in her eyes. When she was stubborn, she had a fire that was strangely captivating. He had once assumed that with her lack of education, she'd look up to him forever. Who could have guessed that once he pushed her too far, she'd turn violent? Kicking, punching, no mercy at all, not even a shred of sentiment left. Infuriating woman. Still, compared to her, Emily seemed so gentle, so educated, so refined. David smiled faintly and said, "Don't be silly, Emily. You're beautiful, intelligent, and thoughtful. There's no comparison between you and Anna Lewis. How could she possibly hate you?" The night nurse, a petite woman named Nina, came in on her patrol. "Visiting hours ended a while ago," she said sharply. "Why are you still here?" Emily Chu didn't want to leave. "Nurse, can I stay? Just a little longer?" Nina smirked. "If you were his wife, of course you could stay to take care of him. But you two, what exactly are you? This isn't some hotel for lovers. Leave now, or I'll call security." Emily threw one last longing glance at David Carter, then turned and walked away. David's polite smile froze on his face as she left. Later that evening, Susan Carter finally came to visit her brother. David's eyes, once full of expectation, turned cold and distant. "Susan," he said bitterly, "why are you only coming now?" Susan arched an eyebrow and gave a faint smile. "Are you blaming me for coming too late, or for coming at all?" "Of course not," David replied quickly. "You're my sister. I'm your brother." Susan's tone stayed cool. "Then focus on recovering, David. I'll be going." "Going where?" he asked. "Back to the transport division, or to the general office?" Susan didn't want to play word games with him. "Naturally, to the general office." "That's great," David said eagerly. "We're family. Your success is my success, right?" Susan gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think your college degree and mine are the same? I was accepted too, you know. But our parents insisted that you go instead. You got the best education in Beijing for 4 years. When you graduated, you went straight into the main factory, while I had to do back-breaking labor at the transport line, hauling and loading cargo like a man. 4 years later, I finally made it to the main factory, to accept an award, nothing more, and I was allowed to stay in the city for just 1 day. And what did you do? You wrote to our parents, asking them to find a way to keep me from being transferred here. At first, I didn't understand why you didn't want to see me. Not until I read the internal cultural journal at the office and realized that every essay I had ever written had been published under your name." David cut her off sharply. "You couldn't expose me, Susan. I was the only one in the family who got to go to college. If you'd ruined my reputation, our parents would have hated you forever." Susan looked at him for a long time, her gaze full of exhausted disappointment. Then she stretched out both her hands. They were covered in rough calluses, scars, and the marks of years of hard labor. "These hands," she said quietly, "were meant to hold a pen, and after all that work they finally can again." With that, she turned to leave. David's face had gone pale, his lips trembling. At the doorway, Susan paused and looked back at him one last time. "You think your connections or your money will protect you? Twice now, you've caused scandals because of women. Did you really think no one would report you? You've been lying in this hospital for weeks. How many of your old colleagues have come to visit? Not one. Little brother," she said coldly, "you picked the wrong people to mess with from the very start." A few days later, I saw Susan again at the factory cafeteria. I waved from afar, but she only nodded back politely, her smile courteous yet distant. It had already been a month since she started working at the main factory. She must have heard all the gossip by now, and she was clever enough to piece everything together. That day at the celebration banquet, I had deliberately brought up her manuscript in front of the factory director to expose David's plagiarism. Still, no matter what, David was her brother. I knew that by doing so, I had used her, at least once. A mix of emotions stirred inside me, bitterness and satisfaction both. Bitter that we could no longer be as close as we once were, but satisfied that I had managed to change her fate. In this life, Susan would stay in the city, working in a position worthy of her talents. She wouldn't have to return to the countryside to endure that miserable marriage ever again. When I got home that evening, carrying my lunchbox, I unexpectedly ran into David. He looked pale and fragile, still wearing his patient clothes. "Out of the hospital already?" I asked lightly. "That's fast. Don't broken ribs take at least 100 days to heal?" David gave a pitiful little smile. "Anna, I'm sorry." I tilted my head, smiling faintly. "Oh, you finally realized you owe me an apology?" "Oh, you want me to beat you up again?" I asked, folding my arms. David winced, forcing a smile. "Anna, I know you're angry because I proposed to you only to make you give up the advanced worker nomination to Emily Chu. But I swear, I regret it now. Emily's shallow, fake even. Every little thing that happens, she needs me to fix it for her. She'll never be strong and independent like you." I laughed, narrowing my eyes. "Didn't you used to say I was too simple, too crude, and completely lacking in literary grace?" "That was before," he said quickly. "You're straightforward and sincere. Maybe you didn't finish school, but your work ability is undeniable. You even got nominated for advanced worker. And beauty isn't everything. You have a bold, confident aura, a kind of strength and decisiveness that comes from within." If David hadn't been cornered, he'd never have noticed a single one of my so-called virtues. In our 30-something years of marriage in my previous life, even when he lied through his teeth, he never once said anything kind about me. So this time, I just smiled politely and said, "Nonsense," before turning to leave. But he stepped in front of me again. "Anna, please, forgive me. I really know I was wrong." I punched him square in the jaw. "Ow!" David stumbled backward and landed hard on the ground. "You know you were wrong?" I said coldly. "Let me count for you. You let every woman who flirted with you believe she was the only one. You acted like some master of time management, juggling them all. That's your first mistake. The factory leadership placed their trust in you. They gave you every opportunity to succeed. And instead of working hard, you used that to build your image as some literary prodigy, while sneaking around doing all kinds of disgusting, shameful things behind everyone's back. That's your second mistake. You've done so many rotten things, yet you keep showing up here to apologize to me. What, do you think I'm stupid? That I still can't see through you, Mr. Gentleman Fraud?" The more I spoke, the angrier I got. Finally, I yanked open my lunchbox and dumped the whole thing over his head. "Here," I said coolly, "a special sauce just for you." I brushed off my hands, watching him sputter and blink through the sticky mess. "You just got out of the hospital, so I'll let you off easy today. But remember, if you did something wrong, take responsibility. If you get hit, stand tall and take it. Whatever punishment the factory gives you, you'd better accept it. And stop showing your face around me." David rubbed at his eyes, but the sauce only smeared worse, making him look absolutely pathetic. People nearby shook their heads, whispering and pointing. Then young Victor, my father's apprentice, popped his head out from the crowd and shouted, "Holy crap, David, you've got some nerve bothering Miss Anna again." I quickly pulled Victor back. "Easy, Victor. I'm fine," I said with a grin. "Actually, it's a good day. How about I take you out for dinner tonight?" "Really?" He brightened. "Yes, ma'am." David, realizing my temper wasn't one to toy with, left in defeat. Later, I heard he went to see my aunt, Margaret and Gwen, the real head of the family, trying to win her over first, hoping she'd help fix things between us. He came bearing gifts, malted milk, royal jelly, ginseng tonics, and other nonsense, trying to buy forgiveness with politeness. But Aunt Margaret didn't even lift an eyebrow. "When you take gifts," she said dryly, "you speak softly. When you accept favors, your hands get short. I'm not a Chew, so I don't have that kind of weakness. David, pretending not to hear the insult, forced a polite laugh. Aunt Margaret, I came here today just to apologize. She raised a hand to stop him. You see that intersection out there? Go put your gifts in the middle of the street, then kneel and bow 3 times in all 4 directions, east, west, north, and south, and see if anyone answers. Maybe then you'll understand what forgiveness looks like. David kept his strained smile. You're so funny, Aunt Margaret. No, she snapped. You're the one joking. You think you can waltz in here with a few gifts like you're making an offering at a temple and expect me to stay silent? Just because the statue doesn't talk doesn't mean it forgives you. Take your presents and yourself right back where you came from. I won't accept either. Understood? The next day, David tried a new strategy. The next day, David rolled up his sleeves, grabbed a broom and mop, and went straight to my mother's office to volunteer for cleaning duty. Mom, Margaret Nguyen, didn't even look up. She cracked sunflower seeds between her teeth, acting as though he didn't exist. David forced himself to stay calm, sweeping and scrubbing diligently from the start of the shift until it ended. As Mom picked up her bag and headed out for the day, he hurried to follow her. Aunt Margaret, he said quickly, I really want to apologize to you and your whole family. She shot him a sharp sideways glance. Oh, so you're not learning from Lei Feng by doing good deeds after all. You've got other plans, huh? Apologize to my family? Fine, we've heard your apology. What now? You want me to bless your reunion with Anna? David's lips twitched, unsure what to say. I'll admit, Mom continued, her tone calm but cutting, you're talented, but unfortunately, you've got no conscience. You think only you know how to calculate pros and cons, and everyone else is a fool, right? You think one bag of gifts and a day of cleaning floors will touch the heavens and win back the daughter I raised for 25 years? Let me make this clear. My daughter's name is Anna Lewis. She's not a Chew, and she'll never be one. She doesn't need to cry or beg for a man to marry her. Her father and I did not raise a girl who has to sell her dignity to get a husband. David froze. He had expected Mom to explode in a fit of anger, shouting, maybe even throwing things, so he could kneel dramatically in public, let people see his sincere remorse. Instead, her quiet, deliberate words sliced through him like a blade, peeling back every layer of his hypocrisy until the rotten core was laid bare. After all this time, she said, cracking another seed between her teeth, you still don't get it, do you? You both got into a fight, yet somehow Anna walked away without even a warning on her record, while you had to fake appendicitis to hide out in a hospital. Don't you wonder why? David's face drained of color. I didn't know. What's wrong? Mom interrupted, raising an eyebrow. You think the doctors at the city hospital are idiots? Or do you think my connections are just a joke to you? David stayed silent, his jaw tight. The transport division, Mom said coolly, is a fine place for you. It'll wear down your pride, exhaust your body, and starve your ambition. Exactly what you need. David looked like a man who had just been sentenced to a lifetime of hard labor. Mom gave a faint smile. We're all educated people here, aren't we? If it weren't for those chaotic years, Anna wouldn't have stopped school after elementary. She's bright, sharp, and strong-minded, exactly the kind of woman this world needs. Maybe you think she's beneath you, but in my eyes, you're the one who doesn't measure up. Now be a good boy and go. From now on, don't show your face to me again. My family and I will never forgive you. David, who had spent his whole life full of arrogance, had never been so thoroughly crushed. To be demolished like that by an ordinary middle-aged woman in a wool cardigan, it was a humiliation that would linger like a chronic wound he'd never recover from. When Mom told me the story that night, I laughed so hard I almost fell off my chair. Mom, you're incredible. Watch your mouth, she said, though even she was fighting a smile. Dad, sitting beside her, was laughing so hard he had tears in his eyes. We're all educated people. Huh, that line alone could kill him. The great college graduate completely outplayed. Finally, even Mom broke into laughter. That boy's heart is as hollow as a lotus stalk, she said. The factory director already made his decision, and yet he still came running to butter me up, and to the wrong person at that. What on earth was he thinking? What else could he think? I said, shaking my head. Sure, David's a college graduate, but he's got no background. Back then, all those girls he met through matchmaking. He didn't pick me because of love. He picked me because both my parents worked in important positions at the factory, even though I was the least educated of them all. Now that the factory directors found out about his fraudulent writing, of course, he's desperate to cling to someone influential. The fact that he came begging to our family just proves one thing: he's already run out of everyone else willing to help him. He must have already tried everyone else, every favor, every connection, and only when there was no one left to beg did he come crawling to my family to atone. But something about it didn't sit right with me. If David dared to come find me now, that meant he'd stopped caring about Emily Chu altogether. So what if he really did get transferred to another division? Would Emily, who'd spent her life chasing shortcuts, still follow him then? In my past life, those two had ruined me beyond redemption. In this one, they would go down together. No way was I letting that tragic little pair of star-crossed lovers drift apart. Victor soon came back with news. He'd been snooping, as I'd asked. "David's about to be reassigned," he said. "They're saying it's to avoid dragging Emily into his mess, but really, he just wants to cut her off." "And Emily?" I asked, half smiling. "She's playing both sides," he said, scratching his head. "On one hand, she swears to David she'll wait for him forever. On the other, she's cozying up to technician Theo Cox. You know, the guy who's been fawning over her for months. He's been showering her with gifts, a fountain pen, black leather shoes, a fancy imported belt. Not cheap stuff either." Theo Cox. The name tickled the edge of my memory. Then it hit me. He was that quiet worker who always hovered around the crowd. The day I caught David and Emily together and gave them both a good beating, Theo had been the one outside the infirmary window murmuring, "Emily's so gentle and kind, she could never do something like that." At the factory banquet, when Emily ran off crying, he'd been the one who patted her shoulder to comfort her. Back then, he'd just been a background character, someone who passed quietly through Emily's life. But this time around, with Emily stumbling from one disaster to the next, he'd stepped right into the spotlight, revealing himself for what he really was, a lovesick fool. "Well," I said calmly, "if that's the case, then David and Emily absolutely must end up together." Victor blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," I said. "Theo's a mama's boy raised by a single mother. Do you think she knows her son's planning to take the blame for Emily's messes? A silent knight? More like an idiot with a martyr complex. I guarantee his mother doesn't know a thing." Victor's small eyes lit up. "Oh, I get it now. Yeah, I get it. That'll be easy to handle." Soon enough, Victor and his buddies had tracked down when and where Emily and Theo were meeting. An isolated little grove on the edge of the industrial zone, where no one usually passed by. Meanwhile, I had someone slip a love letter under David's pillow in the dormitory. It was written in the flowery tone of a starry-eyed young girl. Line after line dripped with infatuation and longing. But the real hook was the last sentence. "I might know a way to help you avoid your transfer. Please meet me." David, of course, took the bait. In his mind, there was no limit to his charm. He probably thought he'd caught the heart of some influential young lady who could save his career. When he arrived at the Grove, the first thing he saw was Emily, her twin braids tied neatly, wearing a white sweater over a pale pink skirt, and those same shiny black shoes she always wore. She'd clearly dressed up for the occasion, styled like one of those actresses from the fashion magazines. David froze. "Emily? What are you doing here?" Emily's eyes widened in alarm. "David? Why are you here? You shouldn't be. Go quickly." While the two of them stumbled over each other's words, not realizing they were talking about completely different things, Theo Cox appeared. The lovesick fool saw the scene, and fury overtook him. Whether it was to defend his goddess's honor or to fight for his right to choose his own partner, he stormed forward and started swinging at David. "I've waited so long for Emily to notice me," he shouted. "Who are you to steal her from me?" It all happened fast, too fast. By the time they were grappling in the dirt, Theo's widowed mother arrived with a group of her neighbors. She'd been tipped off by Victor, of course, and charged into the fray like a lioness. "You dare hit my son?" she screamed, grabbing a stick from one of the onlookers. "You lay a hand on him again, and I'll beat you to death myself." At Mrs. Cox's furious shout, the whole squad of middle-aged women who had come with her jumped into the fight. In an instant, 5 or 6 aunties surrounded David and started beating him mercilessly. 2 others grabbed Emily Chu, ripping at her clothes and yanking her hair before dragging her over so that Mrs. Cox herself could deliver several loud, ringing slaps across her face. "My good, honest son was bewitched by you, you little homewrecker!" Mrs. Cox shouted, her voice hoarse with rage. "Everything you're wearing, the dress, the shoes, the jewelry, was bought with the money Theo saved for years. You see something nice, and you just have to snatch it for yourself. You're nothing but a thief, and I'll beat you like one." At that moment, Victor and his gang, our self-proclaimed concerned citizens, charged onto the scene as the 5th wave of the battlefield. "Whoa, whoa, what's going on here?" Victor yelled dramatically. "Someone said she's been stealing men and robbing houses. Auntie, please, calm down. Let us handle this." Meanwhile, one of his friends sprinted out toward the main avenue and shouted at the top of his lungs, "There's a thief in the grove. A thief caught stealing. Come quick, there's a fight." You can always count on factory workers for one thing. They love a spectacle. The promise of a public fight? No one in the entire district was going to miss that. By sundown, everyone knew about the scandal. When the neighborhood police finally arrived, they declared it a misunderstanding. Since most of the participants were middle-aged women, they decided it wasn't worth pressing charges. Everyone was released with a warning. David, however, was a mess of bruises and cuts. Humiliated, aching all over, he fled before dawn the next morning and reported for duty at the transport division. Emily wasn't so lucky. She ended up in the hospital, this time genuinely pitiful. Everyone knew about it. Theo was formally disciplined, losing the promotion he'd been counting on, and Mrs. Cox was so furious she nearly made herself sick. "If you hadn't been pining after that little temptress," she cried, clutching her chest, "you wouldn't have lost your future like this." The more she thought about all the money and gifts her son had poured into Emily, the angrier she became. She started bringing her group of battle-hardened aunties to the hospital every day, loudly recounting Emily's accomplishments in every ward, just to shame her. Mrs. Chu, terrified of facing them, stopped visiting her daughter altogether. When I heard Emily was hospitalized, of course I went to visit. Purely out of curiosity. Her face was a disaster. Swollen, bruised, infected, wrapped in layers of gauze until she really did look like a pig's head. "Well," I said sweetly, "are you satisfied now?" Her eyes, those small venomous eyes, glared at me from the slits in the bandages. "I'm actually helping you, you know," I said cheerfully. "Now the whole factory knows that 2 men fought over you to the death. Miss Emily Chu, what a legendary beauty you've become. Why aren't you happy?" "Oh wait," I added with a mock gasp. "You're embarrassed, aren't you? But shame's nothing compared to what you've gained. You got your attention, you hurt who you wanted to hurt, so what's there to cry about?" Then I leaned a little closer, lowering my voice. "I'm just curious. Your father helped David so much, so tell me, why did he abandon you the moment things went bad?" Emily held back tears, trembling, her mouth tightening. Her reputation was ruined, her job gone, and her aging mother too frail to care for her. Now disfigured, she had no prospects left. No fool would step up to take care of her and her mother now. After stewing in her misery for weeks, Emily was finally discharged. The very first thing she did was head straight to the transport division to find David. But life there wasn't easy for him. The factory's delayed disciplinary order had finally come down. His salary and benefits were slashed to the lowest level. Once, people had looked up to him, praised him, admired his education, his so-called talent. Now every day, he hauled heavy loads beside men he used to sneer at. Every word from them was a joke at his expense. Every stare reminded him of how far he'd fallen. His spirit was breaking. And then Emily appeared, like a flicker of light in his dark, miserable world. Even with her face covered in scars, she was still young, still soft, still pitiful enough for him to feel noble again. David's withered heart came back to life the moment Emily appeared. It didn't take long before the 2 of them got married. Life at the transport division was rough, so they went back to David's village for the wedding ceremony. His parents were furious. Their son, a university graduate, Even if he'd only been reassigned temporarily, still had a chance to return to his former post someday. And now he was marrying a woman without a job. A woman with a scarred face at that. To them, it was shameful beyond words. But Emily Chu wasn't one to shrink away. As she went around greeting the neighbors, she made sure everyone heard her story. How her father, years ago, had been punished and sent to tend cattle, and how he had taken young David in and taught him to read and write. Soon, the whole village was abuzz with admiration. Everyone said what a grateful, righteous young man David Tran was, repaying the kindness of the man who'd once helped him. The praise, however, only made David's parents more uncomfortable. There was no graceful way out now. They could only grit their teeth and accept Emily as their daughter-in-law. But the real show began on the wedding day. David's sister, Susan, took a long, exhausting bus ride, 24 hours of jolting and motion sickness, just to make it to the village. Yet as soon as she arrived, David ordered someone to lock her in an empty house on the edge of town. "Sis," he said through the door, his tone cold but self-righteous, "I'm doing this for everyone's good. Mom and Dad are getting old. The whole situation with Emily at the factory has already caused enough trouble. Please don't say anything to anyone. I'll let you out after the ceremony." Susan was stunned. She never imagined her brother could stoop this low. To protect his own reputation, he'd gone so far as to imprison his own sister. The wedding itself was grandly arranged. Although the villagers had never met any of David's higher-ups from the factory, the local elites, the village head, the commune chief, and a handful of respected elders all showed up. Just as the bride and groom were about to bow to the heavens and earth, Mrs. Chu suddenly burst into the courtyard, screaming, "Stop! You can't marry her! You can't bow! Emily's father, he's still alive. He's in Hong Kong." Everyone froze. Mrs. Chu frantically pulled a crumpled newspaper from her blouse, pointing to a small photograph of a dark-skinned man. Her eyes gleamed with tears and excitement. "Look, it's him. It's your father. He's a rich man in Hong Kong now. He came to Beijing for a business conference. They even printed it in the papers. I recognized him right away." People crowded around to look. Aside from the man's last name, Chu, there was nothing remotely suggesting any relation to Emily. Someone in the crowd snorted loudly. "Ha! Looks like someone's gone crazy dreaming about getting rich." The guests began to murmur. David's parents turned red with humiliation. They hadn't wanted this marriage to begin with, and now they were the laughingstock of the whole village. Mrs. Tran, stiff with anger, finally said coldly, "If your family can't behave, maybe we should just call the whole thing off." At that, Emily dropped to her knees and cried out, "Father, Mother, please don't abandon me. My mother only got confused for a moment. You can't ignore me and the baby I'm carrying." The crowd erupted in gasps. She had just admitted in front of everyone that she was pregnant before marriage. In the conservative 1980s, that was more than scandalous. It was moral catastrophe. The shock rippled through the courtyard. The village head and commune chief went pale, then wordlessly slipped away to avoid being dragged into the mess. Mrs. Chu pounded her chest, weeping. "Emily, if you marry him, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." David's parents looked at each other, despair etched into their faces. "Dear God," Mr. Tran muttered under his breath. "We're already regretting it." David stood frozen through the entire ordeal, too stunned by the chaos to even speak. Meanwhile, Susan and I stood together on a hillside not far from the Tran family home, watching the farce unfold below. If it hadn't been for Susan's presence, I would have been laughing until I cried. Susan just shook her head, her face pale with disbelief. "This is absurd," she whispered, then sighed softly. "Let's go." She hesitated for a moment, then added, "Mrs. Chu was right about one thing. Her husband, Mr. Chu, the same man David always mentioned in our last life, he's actually still alive. That newspaper, the one Mrs. Chu had waved around at the wedding, was my doing. I'd slipped it into their mailbox myself." Back in the 1970s, Mr. Chu had escaped across the border to Hong Kong. Starting from nothing, he spent more than 15 years clawing his way up, until he became a wealthy businessman with substantial assets. By the early 1980s, he had sent people back to the mainland several times to look for his wife and daughter. What he heard broke him. Rumor had it that Mrs. Chu had taken up with various men, even dragging her daughter along to marry into another family. Mr. Chu had mixed feelings. He could understand why his wife might have done what she did. It was a hard time, and survival often meant compromise. But what he couldn't be sure of was whether Emily was truly his biological daughter. It wasn't until the 1990s, when DNA testing became available, that Emily's identity was finally confirmed. She was indeed Mr. Chu's child. He brought her back to Hong Kong immediately. Once Emily learned who she really was, she wasted no time. She boarded a flight straight to Hong Kong without even bringing her own mother along. From that moment, in David's eyes, she transformed. From a fragile girl he'd once pitied and protected, into something celestial, untouchable. The poor factory worker's muse became the radiant heiress of a Hong Kong magnate. Unable to reach her anymore, David spiraled into obsession. Heartbroken and lost, he turned up at my door one day, begging me to forgive him and promising he'd live honestly with me from then on. I slammed the door right in his face. "Forgive you? Don't make me laugh. Either we get divorced, or you keep sending me my monthly allowance as usual. You owe me that much, and I'll spend your money however I please." My son overheard and frowned. "Mom, that's so vulgar." Around the year 2000, Emily returned to the mainland. Mr. Chu had passed away. His Hong Kong children were all clever, educated, and well-positioned. Emily couldn't compete. She was given a sum of money and swiftly kicked out of the family estate. For reasons I still don't know, she couldn't make a life for herself in Hong Kong and eventually came back to the mainland. David, the same man who had once sworn he'd live decently with me, immediately went chasing after her again. This time, he even dragged along my teenage son. When my boy met Emily, he was dazzled. She was beautiful, soft-spoken, and wealthy. Soon, he started looking down on me entirely. I confronted Emily. "Why is it that every time you see someone else has something good, you have to take it for yourself?" Then I turned to my son. "How can you side with her against your own mother?" He snapped back. "Aunt Emily doesn't steal anything. I wish I could be her son. We're not even related by blood, but she treats me better than you ever have. Isn't that enough to show what a good person she is? She said she'll pay for me to study in America since my grades aren't great." "What can you offer me, Mom? All you do is nag and force me to study until I drop. You only finished elementary school yourself. You don't know anything." Before he could finish, David smacked him across the face. My son clutched his cheek and shouted, "How did I end up with a mother like you? In my next life, I'll be Aunt Emily's son." Our relationship only worsened after that. When he failed his college entrance exams, Emily didn't send him abroad as she'd promised. Instead, she encouraged him to attend a technical college. I tried to talk sense into him. "You can retake the exam next year. You're still young, you can turn things around," he sneered. "What do you know, Mom? You're just an ignorant woman with an elementary school diploma. Dad's the factory director, and Aunt Emily says someday I'll inherit everything here. Why should I work so hard? Enjoying life, that's what matters." I watched my son grow more useless by the day, and inside, something in me just went numb, so I retired early, shut my door, and lived quietly on my own. Meanwhile, Emily and David were once again inseparable, parading around together, and she even introduced herself as the director's wife. Many people were indignant on my behalf. I filed for divorce once more, but David only laughed and said, "You really are old-fashioned." David looked at me with that infuriating air of superiority and said, "Anna, what I share with Emily is a spiritual companionship. We've never wanted to taint it with the vulgar trappings of marriage. You already have a legal title, a respectable status. You should learn to be content." Emily, sitting beside him, added softly, "I never meant to destroy your family. I just want to join it. Of course, I have my own home too. If you ever feel lonely, you're welcome to come over. I'd be more than happy to welcome you as part of ours." I honestly couldn't fathom how anyone could speak about adultery with such shamelessness, turning it into something pure, noble, and almost sanctified. So every time I saw them, I'd beat those two despicable lovebirds until they had to run for their lives. Perhaps I really was destined to live a bitter life. At 50, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I faced the treatment half-heartedly, and before long, I was gone. When I died, my son stood over my covered body, tears streaming down his face, and whispered, "Finally, Dad and Aunt Emily can be together." Nothing in this world can stop them now. And right there, right in front of my corpse, David and Emily embraced each other and cried tears of joy, tears of relief. They were celebrating the end of their suffering, the freedom to love openly at last. My spirit, still clinging to the world, was so enraged I nearly tore them apart with my bare hands. But in the very next instant, I woke up, reborn. This time, I understood everything I had never been able to accept in my previous life. David's obsession with Emily had never been about love. It was about greed, for the wealth and opportunity her background offered him. Back then, Emily's powerful family would never have allowed her to marry a divorced man, a mere factory official from the mainland. And David knew perfectly well he couldn't reach her world. So, to preserve his image as the devoted husband who refused to abandon his first wife, he kept me chained to him, emotionally, financially, professionally, refusing to let me go. Every gesture of patience and restraint only made his public reputation shine brighter. Years later, when Emily returned from Hong Kong, her mindset had changed. She still enjoyed David's attention and the comfort of his devotion, but she also relished the prestige of being an independent, foreign-educated heiress. She wanted both: the protection of a man like David and the freedom to pursue someone wealthier. So she didn't rush to bind herself to him. By the time I was diagnosed with cancer, Emily had nearly squandered all her inheritance and still hadn't found anyone better than David. When I finally died, they reunited, not out of love, but out of convenience. David, under the public image of a loyal, long-suffering man who never abandoned his first wife, earned endless admiration. Emily, in turn, gained the privilege of living lavishly under David's name. Each got exactly what they wanted. The only casualty was me, my entire life reduced to a stepping stone for David's virtue and a foil to Emily's carefully crafted elegance. But not this time. In this life, I've bound the two of them tightly together. No escape, no upward climb, no redemption. I've already cut off every path to power and wealth they might have had. Now I'm just curious. Once Emily discovers she's supposedly the lost daughter of a Hong Kong tycoon, what kind of storm will she stir up with the Tron family this time? For now, I'll let them bask in their little illusion of peace. Let them enjoy their so-called happiness while it lasts. The day I returned to the city happened to be my mother's birthday. My father, trying to be romantic, had baked her an old-fashioned cream cake, the kind I hadn't seen in years. The lights went out, the candles flickered, and my mother closed her eyes to make a wish. She said something softly in Russian, then blew out the candles. As the room brightened again, my father smiled and asked, "What did you just wish for?" "Mary, what did you just say in Russian?" my father asked with a teasing smile. Mom looked at me deeply, her eyes warm and knowing. "As long as one person understands, that's enough," she said softly. "Now, let's cut the cake." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the candlelight. Her birthday wish in Russian. Wishing my little Anna, the best child in the world, a long and happy life. I understood every word. She'd always known what I was doing. So many things I thought I'd done alone. She'd quietly been there, helping me, covering for me, standing behind me when no one else did. I'd been reborn, but so many memories still weighed on me like stones pressed against my chest. The hatred and pain from my past life were suffocating. Yet now, it was time to start letting go, one piece at a time. I picked up my books again and passed the entrance exam for the teacher's college. Later, I took the test for a part-time university degree. Eventually, I made the bold decision to step out of the comfort zone of the factory and move to Beijing. At that time, Susan was also there, attending a training program. Back at David's wedding years ago, I'd secretly unlocked the room where she'd been locked up. And from that day on, we became close friends. We visited the White Pagoda together, Tiananmen Square, and the Palace of Heavenly Purity. All the places we'd once dreamed of going in our past life but never did. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what had happened before. How, in that previous life, her family had forced her to marry a man who looked honest and gentle on the outside, but was, in truth, cruel and violent. He had kept her locked in their home, subjecting her to brutal beatings over and over again. They never had children. The man's family was wealthy, but he hid a humiliating secret. He was impotent. David had known all about it, yet he'd chosen to do nothing. He told me, "Susan, You and I might not love each other anymore, but divorce is shameful. We must keep up appearances. If you can endure it, my sister should too. Susan had endured until she couldn't anymore. In the end, she killed that man, and then took her own life. After being reborn, I was terrified she'd meet him again. But this time, fate was on her side. Not long after the wedding disaster, I heard that the man had fallen off a cliff. His body was found days later, mauled beyond recognition by wild animals. In this life, after walking out of David's wedding, Susan never returned to the Tran family again. But David, ever the opportunist, kept trying to contact her through letters from the main factory, begging her to pull some strings for him. Susan ignored him completely. It wasn't until years later, when David and Emily had a son, that she heard from them again. The baby shocked everyone. Ordinary people needed to eat 5 meals a day, but that boy, he couldn't digest a single normal thing. David's parents were beside themselves with worry. At the hospital, they screamed at Emily, "What kind of sin did our family commit to end up with you? Look what you've given birth to. What is this thing? A child without an anus. What kind of cursed fate is this?" David borrowed money from Susan for the surgery. She had no choice but to hand over the savings she'd worked years to build. The operation was successful, and the boy survived. But word spread fast. People nicknamed him the boy without an anus. During this trip to Beijing, Susan even brought a photo of her nephew. I took one look and, well, I couldn't deny it. The resemblance to my son from my past life was uncanny, practically identical. I couldn't help laughing. So, he finally became the son of Aunt Emily after all. May he have a lifetime of smooth bowel movements. Susan burst out laughing. "You're still holding a grudge, huh? Laughing like that?" I grinned. "Some things are just too disgusting to keep thinking about. Better to laugh. When life turns out better than theirs, it's worth smiling about." After we parted ways, I headed straight to the TV station. The backstage area was bustling like a construction site. Bright lights, cables, people shouting directions. I was quickly ushered to the dressing room, where a stylist began working on my makeup and outfit for the evening broadcast. Afterward, I waited in the hallway of the TV station, heart pounding as the song lyrics echoed silently in my head. I was about to go on stage. At the same time, back in the factory's workers' housing compound, my father paced impatiently. "Mary, it's already evening. When is Anna coming on?" Mom, though pretending to be calm, was clutching a tin of cookies with both hands. "Why are you so nervous? This is Central Television. There are so many big stars performing. It's her first time, of course, it'll take a while." A few neighbors had crowded into our small living room, just as anxious as my parents, all waiting for that familiar face to appear on screen. Meanwhile, in another village far away, where the icy wind sliced through the night, the only house with a television belonged to the village head. Almost everyone from the village had bundled themselves in thick cotton jackets and crowded together in that little room to watch the evening broadcast. David was among them. He took a drag of his cigarette and immediately started coughing. The cheap tobacco burned his throat. It was awful. It couldn't compare to the imported cigarettes he used to smoke back when he worked in the general office. Now he was just a transport worker, and all his co-workers smoked this rough kind. Sometimes he even pitied them, thinking, these poor men might live their whole lives never knowing what a good cigarette tastes like. A villager nearby nudged him. "Hey David, when are you going back to the main factory? And why didn't your sister come home for New Year's? Your wife's still stuck at home watching the kid, huh? That little one without a..." The man didn't finish before bursting into crude laughter. "Without an anus, right? How's he doing?" "Ha." David's face turned red with rage. He snapped back, arguing fiercely with the men, but they only jeered louder. A scholar like him, with his soft hands and polished words, could never win against farmers hardened by years in the fields. Within moments, 3 or 4 blows sent him sprawling to the dirt. Just then, the TV volume was cranked up to its highest setting, and the host's bright voice blared through the room. "And now, please welcome the young singer Anna Lu, performing White Magnolia Forest." David's eyes flew open wide. What? That voice? How could it be her? Back in the factory housing, my father let out a shout of pure joy. "That's my daughter. That's my girl." Mom elbowed him sharply. "Keep your voice down. She's singing." He quickly covered his mouth, but tears streamed freely down his face. The neighbors gasped in awe. Mrs. Lee trembled with excitement, clutching her hands. Little William burst out the front door and shouted through the courtyard, "Turn on your TVs, everyone, or the radio, whatever you have. Our factory has a star now. It's my sister Anna." In my previous life, I had loved singing too, but no one ever believed I could amount to anything. After marriage, my husband and even my son crushed what little confidence I had left. "You're a mother now," David used to say. "You should put family first." And my son, he'd wrinkle his nose. "Mom, your singing is terrible." But this life was different. It all began by accident while I was studying at the Teachers' College in Harbin. One evening, my classmates and I went out for grilled skewers. I got a little drunk and started singing the Song of the Five Rings right there on the street. A man sitting at the next table turned around and said, "You have a beautiful voice. Would you consider coming to Beijing to pursue a singing career?" I recognized him immediately from my memories. He was the music manager who would later become one of the most respected figures in the industry. So I said yes. I figured, even if it didn't work out, it was fine. I'd already been given a second life. If nothing else, I could still make a living running a small business in Beijing. I enrolled in formal vocal training under a renowned singing instructor and started from scratch. Step by step, my teacher recommended me for local performances, then provincial stages, and eventually national ones. In 1990, I finally stood under the bright lights of the Central Television stage, singing before the entire country. My performance of White Magnolia Forest spread like wildfire. From that moment, my singing career soared. Music critics said I carried a unique energy, a kind of quiet strength, a disregard for life and death that made me unforgettable. But the truth was simpler. Because of my past health struggles, I had learned to pour every ounce of life into my songs. I sang with everything I had. My career soon became so busy that I barely realized how much I'd changed. I didn't even notice that. Somewhere out there, I had already become the legend of someone else's story. By the time the new millennium came, Mom and Dad finally retired, and I brought them to live with me in Beijing. Ever since I'd entered the entertainment industry, I'd always dressed plainly. Thick coats, scarves, and hats that covered half my face, just like some timid countryside auntie. As we stepped out onto the bustling city street, Mom sighed in disapproval. "Anna, honestly, you look so sneaky. In a minute, when a crowd starts chasing you for autographs and photos, you'll regret dressing like that." I laughed, but before I could reply, a young boy suddenly ran up to me, eyes wide with desperation. "Mom, I knew it was you. Please take me with you. Please, I was wrong." Mom and I both instinctively took a step back. "Who's your mother?" I asked, startled. "You've got the wrong person." Just then, an elderly woman with silver hair, Mrs. Chu, rushed up and grabbed the boy by the arm, jerking him backward. "You ungrateful little bastard! How dare you call her your mother when your real mother isn't even dead yet?" In that instant, I recognized him. I knew exactly who he was, but I said nothing. The boy burst into tears. "Mom, it's really me. You gave birth to me. How did I suddenly become Aunt Emily's son?" "Mom, please, Dad's a vegetable now. Aunt Emily hurt him. We're starving and she still won't give us any money. She keeps saying Dad ruined her life. That if it weren't for him, she'd have inherited everything in Hong Kong. Please, Mom, save me." Mrs. Chu slapped him across the face again and again. "You wretched child, shut your filthy mouth." The more I listened, the clearer everything became. It was exactly what I'd suspected. The boy fell to his knees before me, crying so hard he could barely breathe. "Mom, I was wrong. I'm sorry." I parted my lips, but no words came out. Still, the child must have seen something in my eyes, some fleeting trace of recognition. His expression lit up. "You do remember me. I knew it. You'd never abandon me." At that moment, Susan arrived, accompanied by several staff members from the factory. The boy recoiled, then turned to flee. "I'm not going back to the asylum. I'm not crazy," he shouted. The staff immediately ran after him. Susan turned on Mrs. Chu, her voice sharp. "I told you he needs to be hospitalized. He just couldn't bear it. Your brother's life was already ruined. Do you want your grandson's life ruined too?" Mrs. Chu said nothing, just stood there trembling, tears running down her face. Susan finally noticed me and gave a small, rueful smile. "Well, look who's back." The famous singer herself. You must think this is quite a spectacle. When she saw that the staff had caught the boy, she had to leave for other matters. Mrs. Chu followed them, still weeping silently as they led the child away. Later, back at our old factory compound, my parents' luggage was piled high in the corridor. Dad was watching the movers with his usual stern expression. I asked curiously, "That boy, he's the son of Emily and David, isn't he?" Susan, standing nearby, nodded calmly. "Yes, that's him. He's been delusional ever since he learned to talk. He should have started school years ago, but his condition comes and goes." She sighed. It started when Mrs. Chu began claiming that her real father was some Hong Kong businessman. 2 years ago, someone actually came looking for her, said he was there to acknowledge his daughter. He gave her a sum of money and promised a regular monthly allowance after that. Ever since then, Emily's been completely unstable, Susan continued. After she read in the papers that her biological father was wealthy, she's been obsessed with going to Hong Kong. Everyone knows if she ever goes, she'll never come back. And David, he couldn't resist dreaming about getting rich, so he kept contacting people there nonstop. But the Hong Kong representative said Mr. Chu's health was too poor to receive guests. Susan sneered. Receive guests? Who talks that way about their own daughter? Of course, Emily didn't believe them. She thought the Tran family was plotting against her, keeping her from leaving. They fought constantly. The boy's mental state got worse. He started pointing at the TV and saying I was his real mother. Emily thought David had let something slip, that deep down, he still loved me. Susan's voice grew hard. In front of their son, David admitted he regretted everything, said if he hadn't favored Emily all those years ago, he wouldn't have been cast out. If he'd stayed at the main factory, he could have been married to the famous singer by now. She gave a short, bitter laugh. He still dared to dream. Emily lost control and beat him until he fell into a coma. He's been a vegetable ever since. David's parents both fell ill from the shock and died within a year. The only one left in that family now is that poor boy, the one born without an anus. I hesitated. And Emily? Susan exhaled slowly. She's in custody. A lawyer from Hong Kong came to defend her, but it's not looking good. They said her sentence might be reduced, Susan told me. And Mrs. Chu still wants to follow the lawyer back to Hong Kong. But in Hong Kong, Mr. Chu had already remarried, twice, and Mrs. Chu herself had taken another husband years ago. How could they possibly let her go there now? Susan added with a weary sigh. They gave her a small pension for old age and sent her on her way. Nothing more. Mom, listening nearby, shook her head. What a mess. The whole thing's just a pile of nonsense. I sat there stunned. Even though I had long known that David and Emily's union would never end peacefully, and even though I had expected Emily to cause chaos once she learned her true background, I hadn't imagined it would end in murder. Mom continued. Susan's the deputy director of the factory now. She's always busy. And on top of that, she's raising that poor kid, the one without an anus. She said that when Emily gets out of prison, she'll return the boy to her. After that, whatever they do is their own business. It turned out that the factory director had a sharp eye for talent. Within a year of Susan working in the general office, he sent her to Beijing for further training. Later, she accompanied him to every important conference and inspection trip. Susan eventually took the university entrance exams again, and from there, her career only climbed higher. When the factory director retired, she, his longtime protege, was directly appointed as his successor, taking on the position of deputy director. She led the once state-owned factory through the great waves of reform, transforming it into a thriving private enterprise. By the turn of the millennium, she had become one of the most respected female entrepreneurs in the entire country. It was poetic in a way. This had been David's destined path in the previous life. Now in this one, it rightfully belonged to Susan. In some strange cosmic balance, it felt fair. As we left the old housing compound, Mom pointed to a cluster of high-rise buildings gleaming in the distance. That's the new residential block the factory built. Mrs. Lee's family lives on the 10th floor. She rides the elevator up and down every day just for fun. That's wonderful, I said. Dad nodded. A lot of the old factory families have moved there already. You know Mrs. Taylor, Calvin's mother? She's one of the community volunteers now, wears a red armband, Patrols the neighborhood, checks the sanitation. People actually fear her. I couldn't help laughing, remembering how that same Mrs. Taylor had once marched an entire gang of relatives into the woods years ago, leading the charge like a warrior. A few people passing by greeted me warmly. I smiled and returned their greetings politely. Then from the crowd, a woman called out in excitement, "Oh my God, it's really you, the famous singer from TV." She grinned wide. "It's me, Karen Toman. Do you remember me?" My face lit up instantly. "Of course I remember you. How have you been?" Karen beamed with pride. "I got promoted to the main factory office. And you, did you ever get married?" I laughed. "Not yet." She giggled, a mix of playfulness and mild regret. "Well, I did. I married a soldier, tall, handsome, looks like he walks straight out of a movie poster." I teased. "Then I can't compete with you. Too many men around you, huh? Must have been dizzying trying to choose." Her laugh came out half bitter, half sweet, and somehow that made it even more endearing. "I don't know why," I said softly, "but when I do get married, I'll be sure to invite you." She arched a brow. "Really? You'd invite me?" "Of course," I said. "If you wish good things for others, they'll remember the good in you." For a moment her eyes softened, strangely shy. Then a car horn honked near the gate. It was William's car. "Come on, everyone's waiting," he said as we climbed in. "Anna, it's been ages since you came back," he said, smiling in the rearview mirror. "Let me drive you around the area." I shook my head. "Can't today. I've got a flight tomorrow. There's a concert in Shanghai." Mom gently patted my hand. "I always knew your hands weren't meant for holding a pen. I thought maybe they'd hold tools or brushes, but I never imagined a microphone." I smiled and replied to her in Russian, a simple phrase we both knew well. We looked at each other and laughed softly. Dad, sitting in the passenger seat, had already dozed off, his head bobbing with the car's motion. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the golden afternoon light, happiness felt like sunlight, gentle, steady, and